Okay, so next here we're going to discuss physicalism. And this is the view that, well, this is the idea that somehow our mind is just physical stuff, or the workings of physical stuff. That's to put it very, very simply. But the reason why people might have this view is because things like Alzheimer's, things where our brain seems to affect how we act and our physical body seems to affect how we act, makes people think that perhaps there isn't anything called mind that is separate from the physical stuff. So a lot of people use physicalism and materialism interchangeably, so I'm not going to worry about the distinction too much, but really serious physicalists like Paul and Patricia Churchland take a hard line on the idea that mental states aren't just tied to the brain, but mental states just are physical states of the brain. Physical states of the brain is all there is. So when you're feeling something like pleasure or pain, there's nothing going on except for electrochemical processes in the brain. So there's not such a separate thing such as mind. And usually this kind of view is called identity theory or something like reductive materialism. So basically, again, this theory says that mental states are just physical states of the brain. So pain is whatever neurological process is going on inside our bodies after we stub our toe. So that physical sensation causes other physical things to happen in our brain, like neurons firing and so on and so forth, and that's really all there is to pain. Now, right now, really, despite the science fiction movies that suggest otherwise, scientists don't really know exactly what part of the brain does certain things, and they can't really stimulate your brain to make you see visions or anything like that. But the idea that these staunch identity theorists have is that someday we'll be able to do that sort of thing. Because the mental is just the physical. So reductive materialism is kind of the same as identity theory for our purposes, and it's the idea that with more research, scientists will be able to explain all the workings of the human brain. And so what we think of as our mind, we don't really need to worry about that anymore. That's not really a thing. And Paul Churchland puts it this way, that there are certain things that we used to think were mysterious before we had science to really understand them, and that now that when we understand all of neuroscience, these theories such as cognitive behavioral therapy and theories about people's mental states will be understood just in terms of neurological processes in the brain. So it's going to all be explained by chemicals and physical stuff. And again, why would you have this view? Churchill points out that humans are made up of physical stuff, physical substances, and they develop from physical origins. So by simplicity, why not assume that everything about us is physical? Furthermore, he points out that we've been able to explain parts of behavior patterns of at least animals with things like evolution and other physical explanations. So neuroscience has been able to explain the behavior of many different creatures, though it hasn't really been successful with humans yet, according to them. So some reductive materialists leave open the possibility that the field of psychology will still be useful, even though we can figure out the brain using neuroscience. Some people like J.J. Smart still think that we might be able to use good old folk psychology to explain some things. Others don't. Eliminative materialists don't. So eliminative materialists, again, like the Churchlands, say that, look, neuroscience is going to completely replace folk psychology as a scientific theory. And he compares this to the idea of, thinking that there were witches because we didn't understand certain things about human beings. and about science, that we thought there were such things as witches, and that we don't believe in that anymore because we've sort of found different ways to figure out the world. And he thinks the same thing will be the case with neuroscience, that folk psychology is just going to disappear because it's not really describing anything real. Remember, there are no mental states that are separate from the physical for the Churchlands. So if that's the case, then we don't need this folk psychology. We only need neuroscience, and we can explain everything through the physical. So some people have tried to argue against this, and some of the most colorful cases have used interesting thought experiments to try to argue that there is in fact something else going on. So Frank Jackson asked us to imagine a neuroscientist named Mary who spent all her life in a black and white room. But while she was there, she learned everything about the physical processes that lead to the perception of color. So she learned this through her black and white books and her black and white computer, blah, blah, blah. So when she finally leaves the black and white environment, she sees color for the first time. What Jackson wants to know is, does she learn something new? If physicalism is true, he says, then she wouldn't, because she knows all the physical processes. She understands exactly what happens when somebody sees color. So when she leaves her black and white room and sees color for the first time, it should not be a different experience, because there is no such experience according to physicalism, right? But he argues she does have a different experience. She experiences what it's like to see color, something that she's never had before. And so therefore, it can't be all explained by the physical, or she would already know it. It would not be a new thing. Another approach by David Chalmers is the zombie thought experiment. So this is the idea that we can imagine creatures that have all the same types of brain states as humans, have the exact same physical makeup as humans, but don't have any interior lives or experience. So could you have somebody who talked like a person, walked like a person, acted like a person, but in fact had no interior life whatsoever, like did not experience anything, had no qualia, however you want to put it? He argues that they could, and if we could imagine such a creature, then it seems like we can separate the idea of the mental states from the idea of physical states. That we don't think that mental is just physical. Because if we did, then we wouldn't be able to imagine zombies. There would be nothing to imagine. There would be no way to imagine the physical without the mental, because they're just the same thing. And he argues that since we can conceive of such a thing, then the mental can't be just the physical. So these are a couple of different challenges to physicalism, which isn't to say that they are knockdown, drag out arguments against. They don't disprove physicalism, but they give us something to think about why we might think that physicalism is not true. And some philosophers take these two examples very seriously and have tried to answer these charges. Others, like the Churchlands, just say no, there is no way to have zombies because the mental and the physical are just the same, and no, neuroscience Mary doesn't learn anything when she leaves her room, because in fact there is no such thing as subjective experience. All there is the neurons firing in your head. She knows about all that. She's not going to learn anything when she leaves her room. So again, these are not things that people agree on, and it's certainly not going to defeat physicalism. It's just some thought experiments to get you thinking.